One of the largest influences of scale of your e-com store in your business is going to be marketing. It's going to be the highest leverage action that you can take to actually scale. It's like the wheels of the car, right? It's really what's going to drive in the revenue to your store, and then everything else happens after that. And because of that, a lot of the time stores don't scale, not because of a bad product, but because they actually hire the wrong marketer and they have somebody in the accounts that doesn't actually know how to scale a store if it does have the right products to scale. So we're gonna go over 3 main topics: why a marketer is so important to scaling, what to look for when you're gonna actually hire a marketer, and then if you have a marketer or advertiser in your ad account already, what you can look for in the ad account to see if they're doing a really good job or it's time to look for somebody new. So let's get started. There's no such thing as a cheap marketer. One of the biggest mistakes people make is going with the cheaper option, because on the front end, it sounds like you're saving money, right? Maybe you're not putting up as much money. It's not as much risk. Maybe you want to put that money into the advertising spend. But the problem is really people price, and there are people who are delusional, right? There are people who will price randomly, and those people you're going to look out for based off of other things I'll talk about. But when it comes to just advertisers in general, generally they price based off of their experience or what they've made happen for companies. So if you have somebody who's scaled a lot of stores to an exponential level, they're of course going to charge more than somebody who might be a year or two in the game trying to get more experience. And the problem is, generally when you try to sacrifice money for the lack of experience, it saves you money on the front end, but it loses you money on the back end. Because let's say you spend, $1,000 a month for somebody newer to run your ad account, say it's Google ads, Facebook ads, whatever it is. But that person takes your store from doing 20K a month to 40, 50K a month over 6 months just because of their lack of experience. You might have saved some money on the front end, but as compared, if you hired somebody that charges 5K, they take your store from doing 30K a month to $300,000 a month over 6 months, you make substantially more on the back end, even though it actually costs more to hire them. So the biggest thing you got to recognize is generally marketing, especially the expertise of a marketer, is somewhere that you're not going to want to cheap out on, because you will lose a ton of money by basically cheaping out on the front end. So highly can encourage, if you don't have somebody in your business or your store that can actually do it properly, what you're gonna wanna do is make sure you vet someone properly. We're gonna talk about in a second how to vet them, what you're looking for, who you're gonna wanna hire. But if you're going to bring somebody into the ad account, you have to make sure it's the right person, because it's gonna be super destructive to your business if you try to cheap out and bring on somebody who's just gonna try to spend your money to get more experience for themselves. So let's talk about what you want to look for when hiring an advertiser. One of the biggest things you want to avoid is hiring a jack of all trades. If you get somebody who says they can do Google ads, Facebook ads, TikTok ads, all the different platforms, they're going to do it all under one price, that person is going to absolutely suck at everything, because it's impossible to be the best at all the platforms. You may get lucky and maybe you get somebody who can accomplish both Google and Facebook, and obviously Instagram's included in Facebook. But at the high level, especially with the guys that I've known forever and other agency owners that work with brands that are doing 7 figures per month in revenue, every brand that is doing that level that we know scaling out really well are ones that have an expert on the Google side, an expert on the Facebook side, an expert on the email side, and so on. And reason being is because the amount of ops it takes and the amount of time it takes for the knowledge to occur of all the different possibilities that can happen within an ad account, what to do in those situations. It's just, you can't accomplish that same level of expertise by applying your time as one person to everything or multiple. Generally, you're gonna have the best people stick to their lane, because it's very difficult to be the best at everything. So I highly encourage, when you are gonna hire somebody, make sure they are the expert in their field and they're not trying to pitch you on every other different type of service that they can make money on, because usually those people are just trying to grow an agency. Maybe they're low revenue. They're just trying to kind of fish in different services to make a little bit more extra money off you. So the next thing to know is gonna be the relativity behind time in the space, and then also results in the space. You could have somebody that's been doing advertising and paid advertising for, let's say, 10 years, but they could have worse experience and worse results compared to somebody who's been doing it for 3 years. And the biggest thing is there's relativity to that, right? Like, you're not gonna want to hire someone that's been in the market for 3 months, they had one crazy case study. But point being is, somebody can do something for a much longer time worse and just be stagnant, compared to somebody who's newer in the space, doing it for a couple years and just does better, right? And they have the track record to show that. So the most important thing that you're looking for is going to be the track record of what they've accomplished. Now, people get lucky sometimes. Like I said, you don't want to hire somebody who's had 1 or 2 accounts pop off, because sometimes you can just run the right campaign and it's going to scale because the products are so good. You want to look for somebody who has, over time, over at least probably a couple of years, a good portfolio of stores that they've worked with over time that have consistently achieved results, especially not ones that have pumped and dumped, because you'll get those e-com stores that scaled like crazy for a couple months, and then the market gets saturated. Maybe they're just doing the holiday season and they just spike down. And the same goes for the marketing. Those are usually the stores that are going to be easier to ride out and market for. So when you're looking for case studies, definitely look for people who've ran stores on the advertising side for at least 6 months to a year at minimum. And then over that time, results is maintained very consistent. There's obviously some level of growth. Generally the best stores, there's going to be, of course, stores that are going to scale really high in the front end, sometimes, quicker than others. But in the real world, not most business happens overnight. So you're going to want to see just a consistent track record of growth with the stores that they're working with. One other thing is going to be people who overpromise. One of the things really, really popular in the marketing space are young guys who come in and just understand how to sell. They're just going to start overpromising because they know if they hook you emotionally on potential results, you're going to give them the shot. And then whether or not that works out over a month or two and you leave and you're upset, doesn't matter to them. They made their money and they're on to the next store. So the biggest thing is with advertising, there's always a chance of failure, right? Anything you do, there's going to be a chance of failure. But the best advertisers take that chance of failure and minimize the risk and take the best probability of getting success on a channel. So really what you want to look for is somebody who's realistic and transparent and gives you the actual true probability of success and really lays out, based off of the logical actions that can be taken, what is likely to happen. The guys that you don't really want to mess around with are the ones that are talking kind of out of their ass and just try to guarantee results just because they're hyped up, they want to land a new client. Those are usually the ones that don't have the expertise or the substance behind their strategies to actually take into account to that level. So you see that a lot in like the new age guys. Really avoid the flashy young guys on Instagram who are just repping the McLarens, that kind of thing. So those are usually the ones who have a really, really great job at selling and they're able to scale an agency just because they can sell well. But in the back end of the fulfillment's not that great. So just something to look out for. And then the last thing on this topic is going to be really testimonials. Anybody can really take screenshots of ad accounts or show numbers, whatever they are. But the best thing you can get, especially if they're video testimonials, are real clients that are store owners that are giving testimonials based off the results that happen in their accounts. And if they don't have that, it's really, really common for people to kind of, fudge the numbers and make it look like they did something really big, but then actually that didn't exist in the past and you're just trying to believe into something that might have never happened. So the best thing you can do is make sure that there's the accountability of somebody who owned that store or worked on that store saying, yeah, these guys did what they said they would do. Now we're gonna get into the fun part of the video. If you already have a marketer in your ad account that's been running things for a few months or a certain amount of time, what I wanna do is go over what you can actually look for in your ad account to see whether or not they're doing a good job. Now, there's a lot of relativity to this, right? And there's a lot of variables, but the things I'm gonna go over, in most cases, if these things are happening, a lot of the times there's gonna be a lot more problems under the hood. So these are very big red flags that you can see in your ad account and you can look out for to really decide if you need to look deeper or try to get somebody that can give you a second opinion. So the first is gonna be what they report on. Now, you would be surprised the amount of people that I talk to where they don't get full numbers on what's happening in their ad account. They might even get front end KPIs that are more of ego-based fluffy KPIs. And those are the things you really wanna look out for because you'll get agencies who talk about the amount of impressions you get, click-through rate, things that don't necessarily make you money, but they look cool on the front end. And when you have that, I'm gonna write these down too, because these are the things you really wanna look out for. So there's gonna be CTR, which is click-through rate, and then there's gonna be amount of impressions. And what these two are they're gonna be the amount of people who see the ad and then also the amount of people that click on the ad. Now, these are important KPIs because they will allude to how other things are working. But the problem is you can't judge success on the amount of people who are seeing the ad, even though it sounds cool. So really what you wanna pay attention to are gonna be the KPIs that make you money. And that's really gonna boil down to the amount of conversions that are coming in, how that boils down as far as conversion rate. And then most important is going to be ROI, which is going to be obviously a calculation based off conversions, conversion rate, and spend. We'll put spend in there as an honorable mention, but pretty simple and you'll get. So, like I said, sometimes agencies will do this. This isn't a super, super common thing, but a lot of the times business owners, they don't know the importance of all the numbers and KPIs that could be in the advertising side. And an agency could flex the front end numbers saying, hey, there's a lot of progress. We're getting so many more impressions for you. There's, impression shares going up. Everything's looking good on the front end. It's just a matter of time until the back end dials in. But really in the world of advertising, you don't need months to figure out whether something's working or not. If you take months, you're just gonna lose a lot of money. You'll usually need at least, a week or two to see the direction of how campaigns are doing. And if the back end KPIs that matter, like ROI, spend, and things of that nature, are not starting to dial in or show progress, most times it's not going to just all of a sudden magically start working. The thing about Google, it's a little different than Facebook. Facebook will have those slope periods where in the beginning you'll get data and then it'll start sloping up and scaling. Google doesn't really work like that. If it doesn't work on the front end, it's likely not going to work on the back end. So you want to cut off tests very quickly, or most importantly, cut off bad marketers if they don't do a really good job or show progress on how much money they're making you within the first month. So that leads into the next thing, which is going to be accurate tracking. Now, there's a couple of ways to do tracking, and one of the most popular, which we advise all the time, we use it with our client accounts, is going to be using an app within Shopify. We use specifically Simprosis. They have a great support team, a lot of reliability within the actual app, and it shows really good consistency of numbers. There are other ones you can use, not saying Simprosis is the only one, but the biggest thing you want to look out for is going to be making sure that the tracking is somewhat relative to the actual store numbers. And you can get an idea. I mean, especially if you're using a third-party software like Triple Whale, Wicked Reports, things like that, that'll help. But you'll definitely get a feel if the numbers are off, just looking at what the store revenue is doing as well. The analytics within Shopify of like Google traffic, it's not the most reliable, but it will show you some relative amount of actual conversions and conversion value coming into the platform that you can compare then to the Google Ads traffic. So one of the biggest things that we see, and you wouldn't believe how often we see this, is going to be people doing what's called double attributing, which is basically going to be running multiple conversion actions at the same time. So this happens sometimes when you have multiple agencies coming through the account, you have multiple setups that happen at some point. Maybe you have an app like Simprosis running a tracking conversion action. Then you also had something that was hard-coded or another app running in the past, and then people forget to turn off the old ones. What happens is an agency will come in, and when they set up their conversion action, they don't turn off the old one. They'll just immediately think that their ads are doing better because you have basically double the numbers coming in and it looks like you're doing an amazing job. And then they'll start hyping up the results. And at some point, they're probably going to dig into it and be like, shit, we didn't realize that there's another one running. And then they're not going to tell you because it's a little too late at that point. So there's a couple different ways that you can check this. I'm actually going to talk about the easiest. It's going to be going to the actual conversion summary, the conversion actions that are in your ad account. But once you go to that section, you're going to see all the different conversion actions that are in the actual ad account. And what you're really looking for is only one single primary conversion action. There's going to be primary, secondary. Primary is going to be basically conversions that feed to the campaigns. Secondary is going to be data that comes into the account but stays out of the campaigns and doesn't affect the machine learning. And really what you want to make sure that the only conversion action that's primary is going to be one based off of conversion value. You don't really want, add to carts or other different types of conversion actions counting as primary as well. Those are good as secondary, so you can use that data. But the only thing that should be feeding into the campaigns is how much money the ads are essentially making you guys, which is going to be the conversion action of conversion value. So if you have multiple primary conversion actions, especially conversion value coming in, that's going to be where you have double attribution, and you're going to want to turn off everything except for the most reliable one. So highly encourage, if you feel a little iffy about your tracking, go to the section in your ad account and really hunt down whether or not you have more than one running. If you do, turn off the other ones ASAP. And if you have a marketer that was doing that and they didn't catch that or they didn't tell you about that, that's like a super red flag. I would boot them out right away and hire someone, or just run it in your own account. Like if you have somebody in your account that's making decisions based off of double the data coming in, especially if they're lying to you, someone you want to stay far away from. So next is going to be what campaigns are being used. Now, the biggest thing you're looking for is a robust strategy that's running in the ad account. You don't want advertisers that are leaning on one campaign type or two campaign types, because that means that they might not have the experience of making the other campaign types profitable. And like we talked about in other videos, an entire strategy is going to have different levels of revenue that it'll bring in. And if you're only running half of what a strategy could do, you're only bringing in 50% of the revenue that an entire strategy would bring in. So we'll talk about briefly the different types of campaigns you want to look out for that are running, and also what you don't want to be running in the accounts. But first is going to be PPC campaigns. So these are going to be traditional search ads, basically ads that are running on a search network targeting keywords and keywords based off of intent. Generally, like we talk about, depending on the size of the account at the point, like this could be 30 to 50% of the account action coming in, the amount of spend and also revenue coming in the account, or it could be 20% if you have an account that's already doing multiple to high six figures per month in revenue. But this can be really important because no matter what, if you're running ads on Google, there will be some market of PPC that's going to be profitable, and you have to be running ads there. Next is going to be PMAX. PMAX is more of an omnipresent algorithm type campaign on Google. Very important for Ecom, especially because it has a lot of shopping placements. So PMAX will be super important to make sure that's running. Next is going to be traditional shopping ads. Like we talked about, shopping can now run in unison with PMax, so you don't need to just pick one or the other. You can scale them out, both out next to each other because they have different placements within the Google networking area. And then the last really, there's other little types of campaigns, but when we're talking about the key players in a scaling strategy, the last is going to be YouTube. Now, when I talk about YouTube, it's not going to be, high scaling cold YouTube traffic campaigns. Those are important, and there's definitely a conversation there and scale there. When I talk about YouTube, it's really going after the low hanging fruit actions like remarketing, some of the custom audiences you can go after based off of intent. But like I said, just like on the PPC side, there's going to be some level of profitability to run on the YouTube side, unless you're in a tricky space where it's really hard to create content. So next is a really popular pain point for store owners, and that's going to be the division between warm and cold traffic. And what happens a lot of the times, and really what you want to look out for here, is it all lumped together? Because the problem is, when you have warm and cold traffic lumped together, you really should have maximum minimum KPIs for each of those. So for example, you'd want to tolerate a lower ROI on the cold side versus warm side. And when you have them pushed together, especially in campaigns like PMax and things of that nature, what's going to happen is you're going to scale the campaign out farther because the warm traffic is fluffing up the ROI. And what's going to happen is at that same point, you're basically losing money that you're scaling into cold traffic that's not profitable, but it only looks profitable because it's kind of eating some of the warm ROI as well. So the reason why you want to keep these separate is if you know that you only want, let's say, a minimum of 2.5x or 2x on cold traffic, then you can scale out cold campaigns and cold traffic to that point. And if on the warm side, you want, let's say, a minimum of 5x because you don't want to eat budget into warm traffic and you want some level of profitability there, then you can dedicate, scaling a budget up to you hitting that point of 5x and then slow down at that point. But if they're all pushed together, you're basically going to lose a ton of money on the warm side just because it's supplementing the ROI on the cold side. There's different ways you can go about doing this, but that's a different conversation, right? The biggest thing you're looking for is it lumped together or is it segmented and separated? There is always a little bit of a gray area, especially with campaigns like PMax and shopping, because you will get both types of traffic in each, but there are ways to look at it to see how much of it's gonna be on the warm side and how much it's gonna be on the cold side. And especially having on the search side, which is the easiest way to see this, are the campaigns segmented out by campaigns between those two different traffic types? And if they're not, you're probably going to get some level of reporting that's kind of overinflated and it makes everything look a little bit better, when in reality, as an e-com store owner, you should prioritize scaling into cold traffic because that's what's going to make you the most money on the platform. One honorable mention I want to talk about is going to be those minimum KPIs. Now, when we talk about warm versus cold, whenever you're scaling out an account, you're going to have a different tolerance level of profitability for each of these. And when it comes to warm, you almost always want to have that higher, right? Because at some point, it doesn't make sense to lose money or not make money on people who are searching for your products, your brand already, or aware of your brand because of Facebook. So this is going to be different for everybody because everybody has different numbers. A lot of the times, you're going to have a warm KPI of ROI. It's usually about double at minimum what you're going to have on the cold side. So like on cold, for example, if your minimum to scale, which is going to be different than your minimum to break even, if your minimum to scale is 2.5x, you might have a 5x tolerance on the warm side. And the reason why this is so important to know this is because when you segment those campaigns properly, then you'll have separate levels of profitability based off the traffic you're going after. So once again, make sure if you're running ads on Google Ads, have it as segmented as possible. It's never gonna be perfect, but as long as everything's not lumped together, you're gonna have some level of understanding what you're scaling into. Now, the final thing is gonna be the level of scale with your Google Ads account relative to other areas of the business. Now, when we talk about this, there's going to be your store revenue, and then there's going to be your Facebook ad rev. And a lot of times when we talk about this stuff, we're talking about an average of numbers. There's going to be, of course, different situations. There's some stores we work with where Google Ads will severely outperform the Facebook ads. There's some stores we work with where Facebook leads the charge and Google Ads will bring in what it can. But in almost all cases, Google Ads is going to bring in a relative amount of revenue to make it well worth it. If you're doing $1 million a month on Facebook ads and you can do 300 or 400K a month on Google Ads, hell yeah, why wouldn't you have Google Ads in the picture, right? It's just not going to be, they're just different platforms. You're not going to have the same level of scale on each platform because it's relative to the products that you have. So, but we're going to talk about the average of numbers, right? So when you have Google Ads, a lot of the times it's generally going to do about 50 to 60% of what Facebook's doing. And like I said, that's the average of stores that we work with. And like I mentioned, if you're doing big numbers on Facebook, and this is generally why we recommend starting on Facebook first, getting a certain level of scale, then adding Google to a mix, you want to make sure that it's doing numbers relative to that. So if you're, for example, doing 500K a month on Facebook ads as far as revenue, but your Google ads is only doing 50% of revenue, there's clearly going to be an issue with what's happening on the Google ads account. At minimum, if you have that amount of scale on other platforms, there should be, even if it's not 50, 60% of what Facebook's doing, you should have at least 20, 30%, because no matter the product, there's going to be some way you'll be able to drive in revenue, whether it's cold on the Google side, PMAX, shopping, whatever it is, there's going to be some relative amount of revenue you can bring in there. So when it comes to the Google side, we'll talk about 50 to 60% from Facebook revenue. Another easy way to relate it, it's going to be the amount of store revenue coming in. So generally, when it comes to e-com stores, we'll usually see Google bringing in about 30% of the revenue that's coming into the store, and then the rest of that revenue is split from other avenues. It can be Facebook ads doing 50%. It could be the email marketing doing another 20%. Whatever it is, however it adds up. But a lot of the times Google will do about 30% of the actual revenue that's coming into the store. And same thing, if you are running Google and you have a store doing 500K per month or $1 million per month, and Google's only doing 50, 100K per month in revenue, there's going to be some level of issue on the Google side that's not allowing it to scale. And that's where you really want to dig in and figure out what's going on. So like I said, if you're doing X amount on your store revenue, Facebook ads, and Google's nowhere near where it should be relatively on the percent level, the biggest thing you can do is start really evaluating what's going on in your Google Ads account. Maybe get a second opinion, find other people in the space that can kind of audit what's going on in the account, and then give you advice on scaling, hire consulting, hire someone new, whatever it is. The biggest thing is you making the revenue that you should be making from these platforms so you can actually scale the store. So that being said, I appreciate you watching this video. This was much more of an explanation of what to do when looking for a marketer, what to look for in your ad account when seeing whether it's doing good or bad. We talk constantly in the channel about different things you can run, how we build them, what we do for our clients on the strategy level. You're more than welcome to send that to your marketers to get some level of expertise that they can use next to what they know. But the biggest thing is, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. I'm happy to answer them myself. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.